Oh, there's also, oh, it's pink. I wondered why there were so many love hearts in the chat. Yes, we can. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. It's just I knew that someone was dropping some paperwork off for me, and if we started, as soon as we started, he would then turn up. So that's all sorted now. What is going on? Why is it that one of YouTube's most outspoken atheists is getting together with one of YouTube's most notorious theists, Together for Peace? The position is that during the course of last year's charity event for MSF, Doctors Without Borders, one of the items that we put up for auction was a 2-hour conversation with me. And I have to say, I was terrified because other people had done it. And it was the bidding for 2 hours of conversation with other people was really going through the roof. And there was like sort of like $5 being bid for me. Out of the blue comes Jack, who I think ended up paying over $200 for 2 hours. So I'm very appreciative to Jack for that. All went to a good cause. I also want to give a shout out for this year's event, which will be taking place on over the weekend of the 8th and 9th of December. And hopefully will be better, more interesting, more fun than any of the shows that we have ever done before. So put that in your diaries. Also, most of the advertising and promotional and news connected to that is probably going to be posted on the Magic Sandwich website, which, if you're not familiar with, www.magicsandwichshow.com. Go along there. You also get updates on future shows, future Magic Sandwich shows and the like. And there are just some other fun bits. There was a lot of photographs that were taken either in Dublin or Washington and the like. It's still work in progress, so if you do go to it, have a look at it, tell us what you think. Anyway, that's out of the way. 2 hours of my time, bid for by Jack, who, I have to say, the reason it's taken, 9 months since the last event, nearly 9 months, is that you've sort of like taken a bit of a break from YouTube. Bring people up to speed. Where have you been? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so, basically what happened was, I was a youth pastor for about 8 years, as a Protestant Christian. And I ended up stepping down from youth ministry about, 2 years ago now, I believe. And during that process, I was sort of questioning, trying to better understand the roots of Christianity, and was looking into Catholicism. And basically during that time, one of my friends from YouTube, Cobain the Christian, he had become an Orthodox Christian. And at that time, I basically was like, what is the Orthodox Church? And I started going and basically decided to step back from YouTube as a way of sort of collecting myself and focusing on what really is the most important part of life for me. And that's, trying to understand what does it look like to follow Christ, and what is the closest really expression we have of Christianity that dates back to the very beginnings of the church. So that's what's happened. I've become an Orthodox Christian, which is why sometimes in my videos now I go by the name Apollos, just because as part of joining the Orthodox Church, you adopt a saint name, and so I adopt the saint name Apollos.
So just very briefly, I was seeing in the chat, I've turned guest chat off, and I've granted Baronessa operator privileges. So Baronessa, I'll leave you in total control of the chat room. So have you made a significant change in your theological outlook? Has it been a sorry to use it, a road to Damascus experience, or what's changed in your belief system?
That's a great question. I think not a whole lot in terms of like the fundamentals. The basic fundamental that Christ lived, was crucified, and rose again. That's the same. But some of the approach to the theological questions, I really love how the Orthodox Church approaches many of the theological questions, and in part is because the Orthodox Church approaches it in a very nuanced. It's not this Western sort of black and white type of approach that we're so familiar with here in America, that we see by and large with many evangelical American Protestants. So for the Orthodox Church, it only made sense for me to join the Orthodox Church because I had already, in part, come to understand things in a little bit, in a way that was not so black and white as many evangelical Protestant Christians would present it. Things, for example, like how to interpret the book of Genesis. That's...
Oh, sorry, I jumped in too soon, and then I realised my mic was muted, and I could have stopped. I was just actually going to ask if you could, and you were just about to start, so I'm sorry for interrupting. Give us an example, so I've got something tangible to work with.
Yeah, so like the book of Genesis, for example, how to interpret that. The Genesis chapters 1 and 2. Well, the Orthodox Church, much like the Catholic Church, have really taken an approach that says, you know what, there isn't anything particularly wrong with believing in evolution and still understanding and holding to the claims of Genesis and as truth, but not truth in a historical way necessarily, but truth in a creation myth account sort of way. So in addition to that, the Orthodox Church's approach on hell is vastly different than Protestant evangelical Christians. The Orthodox Church takes the approach to hell as being everybody, in a sense, is within the presence of God. It's how one experiences that presence that is sort of the way in which we might term it to be heaven or hell. So those who experience the presence of God in terms of something where they receive and accept his love, that would be, something we could consider heaven. And those who reject it, it is what they experience is their own, their self, and it is self apart from God that is hell. But they aren't apart from God. It's that they have rejected the very presence of God, of which they're actually in. So it's much more. It's far less black and white as many Protestant evangelicals. I mean, people in the Orthodox Church, for example, believe in praying for folks after they have passed away, and praying for people who don't believe in God after they have passed away. So things are the Orthodox Church really takes this position of it's a mystery, and we don't entirely know, but we're okay with that.
Well, I mean, I have to say that seems to me that you shifted towards my position, and those that have seen us have exchanges before will understand that we come from totally opposing views. But this 2 hours is not going to be spent with Jack and I shouting and ranting at each other. I'm going to prove as best I can that I can be civil for 2 hours. On that point, though, Jack, I have absolutely no doubt that you are utterly genuine in your belief. There is something almost, I suspect, tangible that you feel, and I just don't feel it. I think when you, for example, talk about your relationship with God, there's something. I mean, there's something real there that, as I say, I just don't feel. What is it that you feel, and what is it that I'm kind of missing out on here?
I would never really express it in terms of just being simply a feeling. It's definitely emotion is a part of that, but I mean, fundamentally, it's really about trust. It's about, for me, this general awareness that there is more to life than just self, that although we are the result of random mutations over the course of billions of years, that's not the end of the story, that there is something beyond that provides us a foundation for understanding our pursuit of things like truth and love and peace. And for me, that is very clearly God. And more specifically, God as he's given us an understanding of him through Jesus Christ. So, there's there isn't like a continual, I don't really experience per se this sense of presence of God. Like it's not this emotional thing necessarily. It's more of an understanding of my life and what seems to be just naturally the case, that there is something more than self, and a trust in the revelation that we have that Christ lived, was crucified, and rose again. So, and ultimately just a willingness on my part to surrender my life to that. I find that oftentimes, a lot of my conversations over the years, DPR, it's some of the challenges that people face is the sense of, there's this perception of I'm a good person, I've got my life together, there's nothing really wrong with me. Whereas my approach to life is, there's been a sense of there is something that doesn't seem to be right within me. There is a sense of brokenness. And as such, a desire for me to want to be in relationship with that which can provide healing and forgiveness.
Do you think that it's not inevitable that you're likely to have that feeling if from a tender age you were told, and I presume you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were told that you were born in sin, you deserve to die, and you can only be made better by having this relationship with Jesus and God?
Well, when I was a young age, I didn't become a Christian until I was about 16 or 17 years old. So even though I was raised in a family that when they were children, when my mom was a child, she was raised in the church, but the stories that my family has about that church are actually quite negative. My mom's experience as a child when she was in the church was one of hypocrisy and being very extremely judgmental. So, my mom, when I was younger, I remember her recalling to me about how the church at one point had told her that her friend was not allowed to come to church because of the way she was dressed. And so, this was sort of my mother's experience of church as a child. And growing up, my family was very synchronistic. As long as you were a good person and you believed in some sort of God, that's fine. So
I mean, that's sort of like the I don't know, the banal's the wrong word. I'm having a senior moment and I can't think of the right word. But this idea, well, as long as you believe in some God, that makes you a better person than someone that believes in no God. Is that not a little bit strange?
Oh, of course it is. No, it is. It definitely is. There is I think a lot of people who aren't religious, and this includes people who believe in a God or who don't, there's a sense of being spiritual. So even atheists, in a sense, people who don't believe in a God, still there's this, what some could, spiritual is a big word, but, some could say that there is a sense of being spiritual about things or feeling emotions that sort of transcend the sense of my finite self. So my family, even though they believed in a God, they considered themselves a very spiritual, they were very spiritual in the sense that they believed there was a God. They really weren't terribly concerned with the specifics of who that God was. And had I, to be quite honest, completely rejected the belief in a God, no one in my family would have, at that time, cared on that, because God to our family was nothing significant growing up.
Tell me about it. You say you didn't become a Christian until you were 16, but from what you've just said, it sounds as if you still, even up to the age of 16, you had some sort of vague sort of notion of a God. So when you say I became a Christian at 16, what actually changed within you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's obvious, it's complex, in the sense that trying to recall the situation back when I was 16 or 17, like I never anticipated.
You should try remembering back to the age of 16 when you get to my age, Jack. You've got the benefits of youth on your side. It wasn't that long ago for you.
That's true. Yeah.
That's true. I am much older. Yes, go on, say it. It's okay.
For as old as you are, DPR, I don't know how old are you? Like 45 or something? How old are you?
I've forgotten. I'm that old. I think I'm 48, or was it 47? I think I'm 48. Yes,
See, there
I'm
you
48. Go. Yes, I
there
am.
You go.
But I have to say, I'm the same age as Aaron Ra, and I think I look a lot younger than he does.
I agree.
He's not here to defend himself, so.
You do look younger than he does. It's his beard. That's what does it.
I think he's led a fuller life than me. Sorry, I interrupted. You go on.
Yeah, no worries. So,
You were
yeah,
your age at 16.
right. So, I mean, I had definitely was exposed to Christianity before that, and had gone to church on numerous occasions before becoming a Christian. And the reason why I say I became a Christian was when I was 16 or 17, because it was sort of a decisive moment in my life when I really came to terms with understanding what I believed and why, and really made a very internalized and conscious response to this reality that Christ lived, was crucified, and rose again, which is really the basic fundamental understanding I had at that point. And prior to that, I was involved in basically New Age sort of stuff. So I was going to different psychic fairs and talking with different channelers, and I was getting involved in practicing various sorts of meditation and tarot card reading. So I was really searching for what was going on.
I'm pleased that you never became satisfied with any of the tarot card reading and channeling stuff. That's a step in the right direction. One of the things, just so people understand, let me give a bit of background. But when Jack and I were sorting out the details of the show, I suggested that one of the things we could do is come up with our top 6 dinner party guests and go through them one by one, and we'd have a poll to see what the viewers thought of which one was the best guest. And we're not going to do that, partly because Jack didn't complete his 6, but he said prior to the show starting, he said one on his list was Jesus, and I'd kind of guessed he was going to do that. So on my list I already had Yahweh. And we were having a chat earlier on before the show started about whether we should put out one chair for Jesus and Yahweh because they're part of the Trinity, or maybe get the Holy Ghost. Should we have 3 chairs or 1 chair? Now, in this new Orthodox approach that you're taking, is that a question, for example, which is no longer really important? You might mull it over, but whether God is one person or 3 people or whatever, what's your take on that now?
Well, no, I mean, the Orthodox Church definitely has dogmas. It has fundamental beliefs that it shares with, for example, Protestant and the Catholic Church, and those are, for example, the belief in the Trinity. I mean, that's a dogma of the Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant churches. And how it's the approach to that, though. So whereas in the Orthodox Church, it takes more of an Eastern mindset, which is it's not terribly concerned with providing a philosophical remedy for people to ease their mind. Rather, it takes more of the approach of this is the case, here's why it's the case, and beyond that, it's a mystery. We simply don't know.
Does that lack of certainty trouble you? I mean, is the church itself seeking an answer, or has it reached that stage where it's just, that's an unknown, we're never going to know, we're comfortable with that?
Well, it believes it already. We already have the answer. That is, to say that the Trinity, is for Christians that go back to the beginning of the Catholic and Orthodox Church primarily. That was a fundamental aspect of Christianity after, I think the 3rd century or so, when this theology of the Trinity was really hammered out and made explicit, whereas in prior centuries it really was not made so explicit. And so the church, there has to be a degree of clarity, but at some point the church basically says we just don't know, and so it doesn't say that we shouldn't pursue the understanding that's been given to us via the Scripture, via the church councils, and what various saints might have to say about the matter. But it does say, understand that at some point this is going to be a mystery, and this is not something that is perhaps going to be all that, meaningful to discuss beyond a certain point.
I'm aware that obviously you were kindly donated for this conversation. I've been asking you all the questions. I know that there's one topic in particular that you want to discuss. Do you want to go there now?
Sure. Yeah. The topic is death. Death. I know.
I want to say this to the viewers. I came with the idea, let's have some fun and conversations about dinner party guests. And Jack responded to me, yeah, I suppose we could do that, but I want to talk about death. And I thought, what a morbid subject for a 2-hour show. So anyway.
That is true.
I'm sure we can make death funny.
I'm sure we can. Well, it is a reality of life, right? We're all going to encounter it. So
it's one of the few certainties, I think. Or maybe it's a certainty, depending on what you define death. Go on, Jack, over to you. I'll let you have the floor for a moment.
Well, and the reason, and you're right, I mean, it definitely is sort of a downer in contrast to what we've been talking about. And the reason why I brought that up is just because, a while ago when I had just left YouTube, I had received a message from Ben Caruth, the YouTuber, and basically he told me about how William Cardno had taken his life. I don't know if anyone remembers William Cardno or is familiar with him.
I'm not familiar. Some of the audience maybe. Do you want to explain who he was?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't very popular on YouTube. I mean, he did post up videos, but he was an atheist.
What was his name? William?
Yeah, William Cardno. No, Cardno.
It's not even ringing a faint bell, but...
Yeah.
So he was an atheist and posted videos. What was the gist of the videos? Will was just a really... he was like, one of those YouTubers that wasn't in it for fame, really. I mean, he's just one of those occasional YouTubers, and he wasn't all that dynamic of a YouTuber. Pointing an accusative finger in my direction when you say that.
No, I'm not. I'm just like, when I think of Will, he was the guy that, back in the day, he would drop by the different stick cam conversations that were going on, and he'd sit around and chat, and he'd always, it seemed like he was always in those stick cam chat rooms, and so anyways,
it's enough to drive anyone to suicide. I'm sorry, cheap joke, but I told you we'd make death funny. Sorry, do go on.
Yeah, well, no doubt, Stickam will.
He was probably spending too much time in Mendham's Stickam.
No, I don't know. It was just one of those things where, when I got this message, and what was unusual about this DPR is it was inevitable, right? It's inevitable that the way that we experience the death of others now sort of changes a little bit because, like, for example, Will, I'm his Facebook friend, and his Facebook is still open. His YouTube channel is still up. All his videos are still there. It's really weird, actually, to have this sense of that person still being there, but physically, I mean, obviously not being there. And it was sort of disheartening because when I went to his Facebook page, he had posted up several messages indicating that he was thinking about taking his life. And it sort of struck me as odd how in the midst of all that we do with Facebook and YouTube and how so-called connected we are, that someone sort of got lost in the midst of all of this because he really wasn't a celebrity, I guess, or something.
I think that you've hit upon something there which has crossed my mind before, and the analogy I draw is this: the internet is not really real life, and it's very much like when you're driving see if the analogy gets the point across better. When you're driving your car, you have this space around you, your comfort zone, and you will shout and be rude to other drivers and whatever, but as soon as you climb out of that car, you're suddenly sort of like in the real world and things are different. And I think that's the sort of analogy that I draw with the internet. You can have conversations, you can say things, and it's not as if it's real, but you're pointing out that actually underneath it all, it is real. The second point you make about, the fact that he's still there, Yes, but this I don't think is anything particularly novel. It's just more obvious. And what I mean by that is a few years ago, a friend of mine drowned. It took me over a year before I could bring myself to remove his phone number from my mobile phone. So as I say, whilst the likes of Facebook and people's YouTube channels go on and it's more tangible, I think the underlying emotion about that has been with us for some time.
And that's true. No, I agree. It's the form, of course, the form it takes is a little bit different now, because there's a sense of, you see, with technology and how things are high definition and the pictures are so clear, it becomes more realistic.
I'm looking at Blog TV. They're not quite that high definition, but that's my uselessness in technology. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Will, what's weird is, I'm not sure how, Will stood on different issues. I think, he may have, he wasn't a religious person. I don't get the impression he believed in a God, but, yeah, it was really sad, actually. It broke my heart. And
just before we go down that route, just sticking with the Facebook and YouTube, sort of like going on after your death, there was the case of, and I forget the names, Tony something or other, who shot a couple of his fellow students, including, was it Alicia? Somebody in the chat will probably know. But what's really disturbing is the fact that her Facebook page or her YouTube channel was up after this. And I suspect it was just from a purely practical point of view that no one probably knew the password so they could make it private, which meant that people were going there and leaving all sorts of incredibly rude messages, or some, no doubt, sympathetic messages. But just from a practical point of view, I suppose it's somewhat difficult, isn't it? I mean, there's somebody I know on YouTube who is even older than I am, who's very keen that his YouTube channel should go on after his death. And he has this arrangement with me that, and has given me the password. So on the event of his death, I will still be able to maintain that YouTube channel and keep it going. But I mean, that's his conscious decision. He's prepared that in advance, whereas some people obviously don't. And I think it's going to become more of an issue, isn't it? Maybe we should all be forced in our will to include the passwords to all our email addresses and YouTube and Facebook pages and the like, just so they can be closed down with a certain degree of dignity.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, it got me thinking. I mean, this isn't the first time that I've known of someone on YouTube that passed away, but this was someone that I actually knew more personally and had Skype conversations with. So, but yeah, he's certainly not the first one on YouTube to pass away. But it gets me thinking about when any of us, of course, when we it's inevitable, we're going to pass away, right? So, but the topic of
another issue as well, which is more along my lines of people I very much doubt when they consider their wills, well, they don't think about the intellectual property that is actually contained in their YouTube channel, which means that there is a question about where those rights pass upon someone's death. But that's a legal issue which has just crossed my mind, and let's not even go there. So yes, you're right. It is inevitable. What can we say about it?
Well, so basically, the Amazing Atheist, he posted out a video about a week ago, I believe, and he was talking about death. He was sharing this story about when his father died and how in that moment, when his father was in the hospital, he prayed to God. God, if you're there, now's the time for you to do something. And I'm curious to know, like, how do you feel about that, DPR? Like, in that moment when there's nothing else anyone can do about anything, for someone to respond with the sense of, God, if you're there, please do something.
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Are you saying that even the most diehard atheists at that point of despair and hopelessness may find it in themselves to turn to God? Is that the sort of angle you're taking?
Well, I mean, no, it's not. I'm not trying to be that direct as much as I'm just trying to get your thoughts. Like, how do you? Because it got me thinking about some different things when TJ shared that, and I'm just curious to know how you feel about this idea of, you know, in a moment of a desperation, whether a person, you know, is religious or not, calling out to, you know, whatever understanding or notion of God that they have in their mind in hopes that something could change.
I can only speak from a personal point of view, and well, I mean, it's easy to say without actually having been at that point. Although there are a couple of near-death experiences I've had, and during those experiences, God has never entered into my mind, and I can't conceive of a situation when he would. I mean, I was rushed off to hospital some years ago, a few hours from death, but I have to say at the time I wasn't acutely aware. I wasn't aware of just how close to death I was, and I had to be rushed into for emergency surgery. And at the point of signing the consent form to be operated on, at the point of being wheeled down to the operating theatre, up to the point of the I can never say this word, anaesthetist putting the thing over me and starting pumping me up with oxygen and then the anaesthetic, at no point did God enter into my mind at all. And I don't think, if I've gone through that experience without reaching out to God, then I don't think that there's any experience I'm likely to go through where I would. I mean, it's just something that, I mean, this is one of the points that I was hoping to raise with you, and I did raise with you earlier on, about this sort of like tangible feeling that and relationship you had, because the video I posted about my personal experience, which was my last prayer, explained that, you know, from a very young age I was taught about this concept of God, but and I prayed up to about the age of 9. My last prayer was about when I was about 9 years old, and I just didn't feel anything, and there wasn't, for me, there was not a conscious decision of, oh, I reject God. It was just, there's just nothing here. And I think the way I expressed it in the video was that God sort of just like floated away on, like flotsam on the ebb tide or something. I mean, it was just gentle, just drifting apart. So I've never had that experience, and as I say, I think it's unlikely that I will. That's why I'm curious to hear the accounts of people like yourself who do have, and I say, what I consider utterly genuine and sincere beliefs and feelings and emotions that I simply don't have.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely, each individual is certainly unique. And I've always been very cautious about writing my belief in God upon an emotion. You know, before, when I went to college, I went to a Pentecostal college, Assemblies of God college. And I would go to these chapels, and in these chapel meetings, you know, it was filled with emotion. It was all about being emotional and feeling God and hearing from God, and it was all about the emotion. And but numerous occasions, I would walk out of that chapel, and the music was over, the hype was done, and I'm walking to my dorm room, and I'm asking myself...
Jack, I know it's a crucial point. I've just noticed we're obviously being featured. Can I just say to those who may be watching outside, you're joining me and Together for Peace, discussing issues of theology and the like. Do feel free to come and join us. It'd be great to have you in the room. I'm sorry, Jack, do carry on.
Yeah, so, you know, when walking back to my dorm room, there was this sense of, okay, wait, I just got done in this little room having this experience, these emotions really riled up by the music. And where are those emotions now? And so sort of coming to terms with, okay, if God, my understanding, my relationship, my belief in God is contingent upon an experience, what happens when I don't have the emotion anymore? And so this, my understanding of God when I was at college was distinctly different than many of my peers, in that I was not very emotional in how I spoke about my relationship with God, because I felt as though too much of their relationship with God was actually contingent upon an emotional experience that they had with God. And I felt that that was just really a faulty premise to base one's understanding of God upon.
Can I understand, or try and understand what you're saying? For example, are you saying that the people who go along to church on a Sunday and they become involved and embraced with this, feeling of group solidarity and the singing and everything, they get very emotional, a perfectly natural psychological reaction, which some people will deliberately exploit, the likes of Benny Hinn and Peter Popoff and whatever. But
exactly,
to a lesser extent, any Pentecostal church or whatever, the group feeling, is that what you're referring to? So they get this feeling and they then associate these happy thoughts with the fact that they're in a church, and that therefore obviously is connected to God. So whenever they think of God, they are reminded of these happy thoughts. And is that sort of emotional feeling that you're referring to?
Not quite. I mean, and I do want to be clear that I'm not saying that simply like having an emotional experience is wrong. What my criticism of this when I was back in college, and it really continues to be today, is when what I saw was oftentimes that emotional experience in the moment became so vital for that person's understanding and relationship with God, such that when they didn't have that emotional high anymore, they would then speak of being distant from God somehow.
Yeah,
and I always found that to be very odd, and I couldn't relate with that, because to me, I was like, I don't really experience God. They would sit around and talk about how God spoke to them, and I was like, I've never heard God speak to me. And over time, I realized that this was just sort of their own special language that they had created to basically express how they have these emotional feelings, which in and of themselves isn't bad. But my concern was always that they had placed so much of their understanding of God upon that experience,
Yeah, and before we move on too far, and I forget, the idea of hearing God's voice has always been one that is curious to me, and it's interesting that you're saying that you haven't heard that voice. And
by what I mean by when I say that is, let me clarify, because when they said that, if someone says I hear someone's voice, you're thinking, I was thinking audibly, right? I'm thinking you audibly heard God's voice. Of course, over time you realize that this is just a figure of speech by and large that people use.
Well, no, this is my point. Not for everyone. And we had a caller on the last Magic Sandwich show from Australia, and I forget his name. I do apologise to him if he happens to be watching this, who was talking about his friend who did hear the voice of God. And we had a brief discussion about whether this person may be schizophrenic or not. But I had much more basic questions, which were... what did he say, and what accent was he speaking in? Because this person was Australian, and the idea of God, I'm going to do a really bad Australian impersonation now. G'day, mate. I can't see God talking like that, but maybe for him he did. I don't know. But those are the sort of questions I would have asked. But no, but on a serious point, some people do actually think they hear the voice of God, and not all of them are schizophrenic lunatics.
Right, and I don't deny that there have been certainly occasions in which someone audibly heard the voice of God. Like, I certainly believe that that's possible. I just believe that had if the people who actually say they heard the voice of God actually heard the voice of God, you would expect to see something perhaps, and this may not be entirely fair on my behalf, but generally speaking, when you look throughout the history of Christianity, those folks that encountered God in such a dynamic and empirical way were so changed by that moment that their life was just altered entirely, and they would, and whereas now oftentimes when I hear people say they heard the voice of God, I look and I'm like, you heard the voice of God, how are you still doing, but
Yes.
so
Why hasn't your life changed so significantly, such as Paul on the road to Damascus or whatever, that sort of thing you're referring to? Yeah.
right, and at the same time, that I think about that DPR, I realize that it doesn't take me to hear God's voice audibly in order for me to change. Like
I would be more worried if you said that you had heard the voice of God, but I would have the same questions for you. What language was he speaking? What was the accent did he speak in? I mean, there's this sort of like assumption, isn't there? That I always interrupt. Somebody actually posted a comment on a video, but they said DPR interrupts himself in the middle of a sentence, and I think the problem is I'm sort of like I'm 2 sentences ahead, and I keep on skipping things. Let me try and slow down and be more clear. And now I can't even remember what I was going to say.
You're talking about God's accent.
Oh yes, thank you. It has always interested me that most people's depiction of God is related to what they're familiar with. Do black people see God as a black person? I think probably some of them do, but obviously that's got to be tempered by the fact that the majority of depictions of Yahweh are those that were done in Europe during the Middle Ages, paid for by the church, and inevitably God ends up being white. But this sort of like goes to another opinion I have, which is, you know my stance. God is man-made, and man made God in man's image. But
well, I mean, the understanding of God that Christians have is one that, and within the Orthodox Church especially, is that God transcends the limitations of our understanding and of culture and of language itself. So it's not really that out there to understand or to see how it is that God would speak to his creation in a way that would be most meaningful to that person and that particular culture or environment. And that in no way demonstrates in my mind necessarily that God is a creation of man, so much as God is speaking into the reality of that person's life.
Let me restate it. If an entity such as God does exist, then he is not as depicted in the paintings of Leonardo on the Sistine Chapel or ceiling of the Sistine Chapel or the like. That construct is obviously man-made. If an entity that is powerful enough to create the universe, oversee the universe, interfere with our lives at times, that sort of entity is not going to look like a European, Caucasian, old man with a white beard. It's going to be something more complex than that. That's the point I'm making.
And that's certainly true. And I would say that the Catholic and Orthodox Church, whenever we have depictions of Christ, those depictions are not meant to ever present Christ as though he is the white man's God or the Middle Eastern man's God, but rather the depiction of Christ is really a way of being continually aware of the fact that God did take on the form of man, that he could participate in the same sort of sufferings and realities of life that we all go through, And so in this way, help us to better understand it and feel a sense that we can go to Christ with the tribulations and sufferings that we go through in our own life, knowing that Christ himself went through the same. So the depictions, I think, from the outside perspective, certainly I understand how people could see that as really depicting one nationality over another. But when you take into consideration the theology behind it, it really is only a depiction of Christ.
The trouble I have, though, Jack, is that a lot of people do not look at these things in the detail that you do and consider them and the nuances involved in them. And you end up with, I can't remember exactly where it came from, but the woman who, when asked about Jesus, said something along the lines, well, if English was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. They obviously are not looking at it in the detail and at the level that you are. And I think that a lot of Christians, probably going through that non-thinking process, do conjure up images of Jesus, in that classic, cloak and beard, and God as the, depiction as he's old, wise, white-bearded man. I think people genuinely actually think that. Because they've never really been challenged. They've never gone through the same thoughtful process that you have.
Yeah, and I think Christians nowadays are certainly being confronted with many challenges that will hopefully get them to consider this. Ideally speaking, it'd be nice if the church really would help educate them and inform them what the role is of these depictions of Christ are.
It would be helpful, but the church has never been in my view, too excited about educating its flock. Can I just say that obviously we're still featured. There are 570 people. I don't think they're all in the room, but if you're watching from outside, do please come and join us. You're joining me, DPR Jones, a outspoken atheist, and Jack, Together for Peace, a devoted theist. So we're having a civilized discourse over theological beliefs. And so far, and I have to say this has been probably the longest time that Jack and I have taught without a raised voice or ranting or fists hitting the desk or hands slapping upon foreheads. So there we are. It was going quite well. It's about an hour so far that we've managed.
That's not too bad.
Through 2 hours, you never know.
It's not too bad.
I don't think we had really finished off your discussion on death. I think we got sidetracked. Had we, or do you want to go back to that?
No, I was just curious to know your thoughts about, and I appreciate you sharing that moment in your own life about how God really wasn't a part of, in that moment when you were rushed to the emergency room, the thought of praying out to God wasn't even on your mind.
So say if it doesn't happen then, I don't see when it would happen. Maybe come a time where my imminent death is more apparent to me. But even then, I can't see it happening. And of course, let's remember that the expression "Oh my God" or crying out to God is one that is part of common parlance and is not necessarily associated with a genuine appeal to a deity. You stub your toe and you say, "Oh my God!" You're not actually trying to make some tangible contact with God in those circumstances, are you? So I think that a lot of the times that this sort of thing happens, I'm not saying in the particular one that you mentioned, but a lot of the times you should treat with caution whether this person actually suddenly had an experience that has brought them to God.
Right. Well, I think that one of the challenges with the conversation is that, of course, the atheist, and understandably so, would be semi-reluctant to share that personal moment because, of course, we can all envision the theist using that as a leverage to basically say, "Oh, look, you believe in God." And
I mean, the classic one being, I was going to say Darwin's apparent deathbed conversion, which has
Right.
been disproved. But yeah, I mean, they're bound to rely on it. What I think is shallow about that is that it is got to be one of the most least persuasive arguments that can be advanced. The fact
It
that
is.
someone may, in their final moments, do as you have described, or as is alleged of Darwin, is of absolutely no evidential value at all. All it shows is that that person said that at that time. It doesn't prove anything, does it? Apart from that he said that at that time. Sorry, I'm just seeing some scribblings in the chat. Have we still got Baronessa in here? Oh, and Tony's here as well. Good. Tony, can you make sure you're moderating the chat room for us if you can? Jack, do you mind if I just take a moment to pop to the bathroom? I'll be about 2 minutes.
No problem at all.
Okay, I'll be right back.
What's up, people? What's up? What's up, Carter? What is up? What's up, Samuel? Let's see, who has the most interesting blog TV name? Let's see, we have Amelia USA. That's pretty boring. Let's see, Bag of Dimes. That's not too bad. Belzer. Black Tulip. That definitely is a mental image there. Cat Antics. I prefer dogs, but whatever. Decrovents. I don't even know what that word is. I know I'm not. I need to go back to public school. Dr. Kent Hovind. Are you out of prison already? I thought you were still in prison. I don't remember. Ethan. No, that's pretty typical. Dookie. Let's see. Hello, I'm Carter. That's not all that. Oh, I'm going to scroll down. Let's see. Anyone who has anything interesting. The Prophet Muhammad is in the chat room. Nice.
Wow.
Phoenix will rise. I like that one.
Just picking up where we left off, Jack, about the arguments that some theists advance. I have to say and congratulate you that unlike some YouTube theists, you do not rely on ridiculous arguments. And the one that I have a huge problem with is this, how can you be moral without there being a God? And as I say, it's not one that you advance. Do you understand why I get upset by that argument? And what are your views about it?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, look, I don't advance those arguments, not to say that I wouldn't ever, but it's because I see there's just a lot of, I have to ask, first of all, I think that my experience, over those, 6 or 7 years I've been on YouTube, has demonstrated that whether you're religious or not, there's ignorance everywhere. And
Again, are you pointing that accusative finger at me?
No, I'm not. I'm just stating the fact, and so what you get is, you get these people that sit there and they say stuff and they don't realize that they've never thought more deeply about the subject. So in the same way that, for example, countless Christians have really spent very little, if any, time asking themselves what they believe, why they believe it, in the same way there are countless non-religious people who have not asked themselves, why do they speak about these issues of values and worth in the way that they do? What really is the foundation? What informs it in the way that it does? And so you see people from both sides really failing to ask the more challenging, more difficult questions. And as such, you get people from all sides being very upset and pissed off at each other because
I put my hands up to that. I think that I've been guilty of perhaps ignorant and arrogant sort of approach of demanding evidence. I still maintain that that's a reasonable position to take, but I think that you and I are well aware of previous discussions we've had where I've not behaved with great decorum and decency towards.
Well, neither have I. I mean, let's be honest now.
I'm not going to say a word. Yeah, we're both guilty of it.
Exactly.
But I mean, one of the problems I have in regard to this is you kindly and openly have invited meaningful dialogue between the theists and the atheists, and I think that's fine. But to me, it's impractical. I mean, yes, you and I can have a reasoned discussion as we're having now, but there does come a point where the dialogue is or could end up with, well, does God exist or not? And at that point, I don't see how the dialogue can continue on a meaningful way, because we end up with the same old arguments. So when you're seeking discussion and discourse with an atheist, what is it that you are sort of like hoping to achieve?
Well, you're right. I mean, certainly we can only we know that we disagree on this top. I mean, is there a God? Yeah. I say yes, you say no, and we have gone through.
Fair, Jack. I say I don't know.
You don't know.
There's no evidence for it. That's what I would say.
So, and we've had the conversations countless times over the years. Various theists and atheists have done so. The reason why I believe it's still important to pursue these conversations is because the more that we understand the fact that we are human, that we have to share this earth together, that we live next to each other, and the more that we can understand how we have so many overlapping things in common, then we can build a greater understanding of why it is we do believe what we do, why it is we disagree with somebody else. And I honestly believe that is going to make for a world that is going to be a much better place, as opposed to some of the, more dramatic, over-the-top, condescending, ridiculing, mocking approaches that have been so popular.
I adopt and echo everything you just said. I think that an understanding and an appreciation and a tolerance for people is absolutely essential. I don't know whether you would actually accept what I'm about to say, but the reason that I have a problem with religion is because it, and I'm not being personal, I'm talking about religion, or there are some religious people, but I'm not going to name them, but people who use religious beliefs to act in a manner which is not tolerant. And, in America we can look at issues such as gay marriage,
right,
or homosexuality in general. And it's undoubtedly the case that people are using religion as an excuse for intolerance. What are your views on that?
Yes, so I'm going to answer that question. You're right. There are people that use religion, they use religious language as a means of trying to enforce or create or persuade other people into falling in alignment with what it is that they think, regardless of whether or not they hold their beliefs to be true or not. And I think this is problematic. Having said that, though, however, DPR, everybody is, whether they are religious or not, appealing to some notion of how we believe society and life and humanity should be lived. And none are necessarily any more empirical than the other when it comes to matters of morality. And so the conversation...
I disagree with you, though, Jack, because if, as an underlying axiom to take in relation to morality, you should behave in a way that is tolerant to other people, then I think that is a better moral stance to take than one which says, I'm going to be intolerant towards people. Now, we're all intolerant towards rapists, paedophiles and murderers, and I think that there's good reasons why we are intolerant to those. intolerant towards homosexuality, I'm sorry. If it sounds arrogant, so be it. I think that my position is more moral than that taken by those who use religion to try and persecute and discriminate against homosexuals.
Right, and I mean, if I and I completely understand where you're coming from. What I would say though is, if you step back for a moment, you look at both sides. Both people are invoking a notion of what it means to be human and what is best for our society and civilization. None, in this way, it is a very conceptual, philosophical discussion that is not grounded in the scientific empirical realities that we encounter. Rather, it's something that each person is attempting to understand based on their experiences, their upbringing, their relationships with other people, what is best for our society.
And from what you're saying, it sounds as if you're not, again, the typical theist who may argue for the concept of objective morality, or perhaps you are. What's your position on that?
I really have never, in the 6 or 7 years on YouTube, I've never engaged in those sorts of apologetic approaches.
As I say, I don't think I've ever heard you use that argument.
I haven't.
But that's not the same as that you don't have a view on it.
Right. And I think this is something that when you look over the years on YouTube and the different Christian, quote unquote apologists that have gone on there, it's interesting how some of them have changed over the time, over the years. And honestly, I'd say part of that is because some of their apologetic approaches was much more about, I can use these forms of argument as a way of demonstrating, proving what I believe is true. And I think in some ways people sort of corner themselves when they take this approach, because it necessarily gives this idea of God being confined to the limitations that we have, regarding language. So my understanding of objective morality, I'd never used the term. I find it to be an odd term because it's to me it's too obscure, and it doesn't really. I have a hard time relating with it in how I live everyday life and how I interact with other people. Rather, what I see is in my interactions with people is when I go to work, for example, I work with people who are religious and people who are not. I have people who are gay and are part of the place where I work, and people who are not, and people who sleep around, and people who don't. And the fact is, we all go together at work, and we are coworkers. We know what our task is. There is essentially, it's very interesting, there is a framework that we walk into when we walk into our job, and we all agree. We all say, yes, we agree to the goal, the objective that this business has in mind, and what it's going to take for us all to be able to accomplish it. And really, I don't think it's too much to ask or to think that, in the world at large, I think we already have this sort of framework in place. This doesn't mean that anyone is no longer self. It doesn't mean that no one is not allowed to speak of their differences. It's rather there's a common mutual understanding about what it's going to take for us to get, the task done and we can agree or disagree on whether or not people are being consistent with it or not, and that's certainly a conversation to have at some point. But me saying, for example, to the guy at work who's not religious, that he's not a good person because he doesn't believe in a God or follow a God, is to me really, I don't even understand the sense of that. Like, I have a hard time grasping.
It's refreshing to hear. And if only all theists or Christians were like yourself, I think the world would be a better place. But unfortunately, we know that it isn't. And this is maybe something we can touch upon. I mean, in America, and I'm sorry to keep on going on about America, but it seems to be a very good example. Atheists are the least trusted people in America. I think they come alongside rapists and murderers. No one can stand for any public office without declaring their beliefs. Certainly, so far as president and senate is concerned. I think there's one atheist in the Senate, and I think that he's a long-term representative from California, and he only actually declared himself to be an atheist after about 20 years of being in the Senate. So there does seem to me to be a problem, because most people do not share your view that, a lack of a belief in a God doesn't make you a bad person. It seems that in America, that's exactly what it implies.
Well, yes, you're right. A lot of people, when they think of the word atheist, they have negative connotations to that. Now, I think, in my estimation, at that point, people who are atheists would understand that they really have a PR campaign here. That's the issue, and it's to change people's understanding, much like this, gay marriage. That's changed. The tides have changed so dramatically regarding people's perception of homosexuals, in large part because people, despite the fact of how much, they're such a minority of the population, but we've seen some of them in very public ways. For example, I can't believe I just forgot her name.
Can I just pause it? I'm hearing voices in my head, and I don't know where they're coming from. I'm being very serious. I don't know whether... That was really weird. I could hear people talking. I thought my radio in the other room may have somehow turned itself on. No,
yeah,
they've stopped now. Think I'm schizophrenic. I don't know. Do carry on.
So, basically, there are... I think Ellen DeGeneres. Okay? She's homosexual. She has done an excellent job in really saying, letting people know, look, I'm human, I'm a person, and I live life just like you all do. And what that has done is, it's been a very effective campaign about, to sort of expose people to, basically you sort of tug on the emotion of people's hearts, and this has changed a lot of people's understanding and approach towards homosexuality. And it's left, interestingly enough, a lot of Christians grappling with some things, because Christians are now in the place where many Christians you find basically step back, and their understanding of Christianity was such that they felt that they were, they couldn't really have a homosexual friend, or someone couldn't be struggling with homosexuality. And so they felt as though they had to choose one or the other. And many Christians, to be honest, they don't want to have anything to do with this idea that is very clear in the teachings of Christ, that we are all sinners and broken and all in need of healing. And so this is a very challenging, actually, belief of Christianity nowadays, because things that, like homosexuality, which are, in many ways is becoming much more acceptable. In Christianity, it's still considered, that form of sexual expression is considered to be sinful, much like me looking at porn is considered to be sinful. And I think society really struggles with this idea of, okay, how does a Christian believe that a person is departing from what God desires for them to do, and yet still treat that person in a loving, caring way? And of course, it doesn't help that many Christians really have not been all that loving and caring to homosexuals, let alone anyone else. So,
yes, and as I say, it does seem to be a problem that is greater in America than other countries. There is not that problem in most European countries. Not all. There's sort of, depends how broad you describe Europe. But there isn't that problem, and the countries where it isn't a problem also seem to be the countries where there is a lower percentage of theists in that country, such as the Scandinavian countries. Even not quite, but even in this country, there's still some sort of problem, but people can be openly gay and still be elected to Parliament in this country. And as I say, there does seem to be that difference with America.
Oh, and, America's going down that route, though. I mean, I'm not very optimistic about America at all. I think the fact is many people are leaving Christianity. Many people are adopting beliefs about what it means to be human.
Is that a problem for you, that people are leaving Christianity? And if so, why is it a problem? Because what I'm getting at here is that you've accepted that an atheist can be a good person. So if people do leave Christianity, why is that an issue for you? Because it's not affecting what you believe.
Well, the reason, and I wouldn't say it's a problem per se, but when I say that an atheist can be a good person, what I'm doing is I'm just acknowledging the fact that we are all, like when I go to my job, I'm walking into a framework that we all understand the objective and purpose for that place. So when I say to my coworker, you did a good job, I'm not speaking of goodness as it relates to my theological understandings of God. I'm speaking of good within the context of an agreed upon objective that we all are pursuing. In the same way, when I acknowledge that a person who doesn't believe in a God or isn't religious can be a good person or do things that are good, all I'm simply doing is operating within this larger spectrum of language that we all draw from as we attempt to pursue these sort of basic principles of peace and security and prosperity in America. I'm not using good as a way of reflecting my beliefs that, regarding how that person stands in relation with God.
Well, this is an interesting point then, isn't it? Because I accept, words can be used and interpreted differently in different contexts. Going back to that issue then, it seems as if you do think that there would be a problem if there is this movement away from Christianity in America, and what do you see what is the problem with that, and what are the consequences that you fear as a result of people moving away from Christianity?
I don't necessarily really have, my problem isn't with like people who are non-religious. My struggle is with Christians themselves. That's where my struggle is, because the fact is, DPR, when I was a youth pastor, I went to countless seminars and read various articles and books talking about this very reality we are all encountering, or the Christian church is encountering, and not just Christianity, but really any religion in America is encountering right now. And that is, youth are far less inclined to speak of the religion in terms that are exclusive. They are more accepting of speaking of God in a very general sense, but they want to find a sort of acceptance that is offered by their peers and by society, and so they really relegate the specifics of their belief to sort of church, and this is happening by and large because Christian parents don't know what they're doing. I mean, that's really negative. But let me, when I was a youth pastor, parents were working 40, 60 hours a week. Their kids were going to church once a week, if that. And yet the parents were concerned with the fact that by the time their kids go off to college, 90% of them roughly will stop attending church. And so, if I get up there and I'm preaching these sermons several times a year, letting parents know of the reality, and the parents' responses, Christian parents' responses, essentially, I want my kid to have the best. I want my kid to have a nice home. I want my kid to have nice things. I want my kid to be educated and to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to make a lot of money. And I want all of these things in such a way that essentially they sacrifice the fundamental reality that they claim to profess, that Christ is Lord of their life.
So your problem is if I can try and summarize it, that people are without a theist belief are perhaps more materialistic and more self-centered and selfish. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
No, I'm not speaking about non-religious. I'm speaking. I mean, because when I speak of Christians, like there's a common framework that we as Christians acknowledge. In other words, the Christian acknowledges that Christ is, that we assert Christ is Lord of our life. We assert that we are to live our lives as a living sacrifice to him, holy and acceptable to him as a spiritual act of worship, or as our reasonable service to God. So Christians already make this profession. So when I speak of the materialism, I'm speaking of it, the strength of that idea of materialism is specifically because we have this common agreement about what it means to be human and how we should be living life. Without that common agreement of Christ and what it means to be human and what defines us in our life, then the notion of materialism doesn't carry the same sort of strength that it would have when I'm speaking of people who are not religious. Why would I expect it to have the same sort of strength?
I think I follow you. Jack, we've managed not to shout at each other for well over an hour now. We're coming up to, I have no problem overrunning, but let's say we've got another 40 minutes or so to go. There's one topic I would like to pick up on that you've touched upon. And then do you think for decency and courtesy to the viewers who have kindly stuck with us, we should sort of like look at some of their questions in the chat, or even bring in a caller? I'm not particularly minded to bring in callers, but we can do that if you want. Have a thought,
of course.
Okay, well, have a thought about that. But the one thing that I wanted to pick up on is when you were talking about the negative connotations that being an atheist in America has, and you said it was really a PR issue. And I suspect you think that we need a good PR atheist in America. The best known atheist in the world is obviously, maybe one of the best, at least, is Richard Dawkins, who does many visits to America, many speeches in America, and the like. He is criticized by many as being strident. In my view, I don't see him like that at all. I've had the opportunity of talking to him on a couple of occasions, and obviously listening and watching his speeches. The accusation of stridency seems to be based on the simple and only fact that he actually questions the existence of God. And as I said before, when you and I talk, there is always going to come this point, if we pursue it to it, where we're going to reach that stage where you say, I believe in a God, and I say, well, I don't. Do you think that Dawkins is a good PR person, or do you think that he is strident? And as a supplementary question, if he's not the right role model, who would be, and what tone should they take?
Well, no, those are great questions. Yes, Dawkins comes, it's not so much what the atheist thinks about Dawkins. I mean, it's a question of what do atheists, and the challenge, of course, is, the idea of atheism is it's a little bit, it's very nuanced, just like religious, different denominations are. Dawkins, if people want someone who's going to be confrontational, then the religious people are going to hear Dawkins, and they're going to, as I do, and I think to myself, he's very condescending. And the fact is, it's not just the religious. Neil deGrasse Tyson had, in a YouTube video, specifically calls Dawkins out in a conference that him and Dawkins were attending, and basically says, your approach is turning off a lot of people. So,
expand on that, because I haven't seen it. Maybe some of the people have, but
yeah, and I mean Neil. Yeah, it was very it was very entertaining, because Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Just for the benefit of those who are watching this subsequently, if it's posted on YouTube, which I think I'll probably post it on the Magic Sandwich Show channel, because that otherwise I've got to chop it up into small bits for my channel, because I've been DMCA'd so many times by evil theists that I'm not allowed to post any long videos. Send me the link after the show, and I'll include that in the description.
Okay.
But I've got no problem with Dawkins being called out. It's just I genuinely haven't seen it. Tell us what Tyson said.
I don't know exactly off the top of my head. It just was basically the gist of Tyson's question was, Dawkins, your approach. He was questioning his approach and how effective it was. So, if you're thinking about someone who'd make for a great PR person, Neil deGrasse Tyson. But the reason why Neil deGrasse Tyson would never be a good spokesperson for atheists is because, one, he doesn't assert that label, because to him and this is what I love.
I know he wouldn't do it.
And this is what I love about Neil deGrasse Tyson, though. The man is such an eloquent, profound speaker. And it has nothing to do with whether he's religious or not. When he speaks on the subject matter of science, it compels all people, because he's not speaking to fight a battle against the religious. He's not speaking to advocate a philosophy or some idea of atheism.
There are occasions when he does speak out. I mean, I've seen a speech he has given, again, it's available on YouTube, where he talks specifically about intelligent design, for example, which, let's face it, is a religious stance, whether they admit it or not. So he does on occasion speak out, but you're right, he's not comfortable with being identified with atheism and being an atheist spokesperson. You're quite right.
Right. I mean, and I think it was on I forget the YouTube channel, where he basically, and the video consists of him simply saying, no, I'm not an atheist. I don't call myself that. He says, if anything, I think he says he would consider himself an agnostic, despite the fact that people really many atheists don't like that term. But this is a man basically that has said, what defines me, what's going to guide my life is my pursuit of an understanding of science. It's not going to be a label. And as such, I'm not going to advocate for any notion of atheism. And I mean, to me, this guy is very consistent. He's someone, like, his approach makes sense to me. He's saying, this is something very meaningful and profound to me, science, the understanding of space. I'm going to be an advocate for this. This is what is going to define me. This is what I'm going to be known by. And basically, he stands for something. And in standing for something, it overflows into speaking against other things, just naturally, in a very natural, non-confrontational sort of way. And I think everyone...
Your comparison with Tyson and Dawkins is that Tyson comes with a positive message of science, on the back of which he can tag on agnosticism or atheism, whereas Dawkins is just, I'm an atheist.
Well, I mean, Dawkins...
Is that generally the difference between the two?
I mean, I think, of course, it's far more nuanced than that. But when you look at their persona, the understanding people have of them, Dawkins is riding the wave of being antagonistic towards the religious. And that's his spiel. That's what he's known for. He's not known as someone who is seeking, not among the religious. I mean, of course, he's a brilliant scientist, but... I
mean, that's the thing, Jack, and it's something that a lot of people forget about him because of the fact that he seems to have taken on this new sort of like role, almost. People forget that he was a very good scientist as well.
Oh, yeah.
But this is why I'm curious, you see, with Tyson, you're saying that what you admire about him is his knowledge and ability to communicate science. Whereas Dawkins would actually have that, but he's just not using it. He's just concentrating on what you consider to be kicking theism, I suspect.
If
Dawkins is not a good role model, Tyson is. What did you make of the late Christopher Hitchens? Did you put him in the Tyson camp or the Dawkins camp?
I loved Hitchens in terms of his fervor I mean, the man he just was so unpolished and real that he made his personality was likable, even if you weren't an atheist. I mean, because you got a sense of there's someone who's just being very candid and straightforward, and at the same time, a man who was willing to admit when he didn't know, or when the point that was made in the moment of a debate was a very good point. And so, when I've seen some of the debates that Hitchens has had with various theists, and this is what makes Hitchens, in my estimation, more understandable, more likable in a sense, is that Hitchens was continually in these debates and really willing to engage in talking with prominent Christian thinkers, and he was okay with that.
He obviously had a slight agenda on occasions that he was on book tours. But to go back to the very beginning of the show, and for those that may have joined later on, we were going to have a discussion of our top favourite dinner party guests, or nominations for the top 6. And interestingly enough, I'll give you my list. I know you didn't have a complete list. I'll tell you who mine were. Well, yeah, I'll go through them all. I had Rasputin as number 1. And I thought you might be quite pleased with that, because he was a deeply religious person. Not quite the same flavour of religion as yours. Number 2 for me was Christopher Hitchens. I don't see how any dinner party could be boring if you had Christopher Hitchens there.
Exactly.
He's a wonderful speaker. His knowledge spanned all sorts of areas. He was a great speaker, somewhat of a rake, and there's a nasty side to him. And you can imagine him and Rasputin stealing off to the corner and quaffing some sherries together before the party got started. But I can't see anything that Hitchens would say as being boring. Just to complete my list, number 3 for me was Richard Feynman, who I think is one of the greatest scientific minds ever, and I would just so much love to be able to have a conversation with him. But then I needed some balance, because I needed some women. I had 3 men, so I went for, the next 3 are all women. I went for Audrey Hepburn, who I have to say I think considered to be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen ever. Also, not just beautiful, incredibly intelligent, and she spent an enormous amount of time working for the charity UNICEF, won many awards of that. So you've got beauty, intelligence, and a kind heart. What more? Audrey has got to be there. Number 5, because we did agree that it could be fact or fictional. Number 5, I was going to go for Jessica Rabbit. Are you familiar with Jessica? She is the wife of Roger Rabbit.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure it would be appropriate for me to explain in detail why I wanted her there, but I think that would have been fun. And number 6 for me, I threw this in for controversy. I was going to go for Britney Spears. And before people start complaining, leave Britney alone! The thing about Britney that I love is that she can disappear from public life for a month or so and come back with completely different sized breasts. And that is the sort of scientific experiment that I would want to investigate at close up. So I would have Britney. So that would be my 6. Rasputin, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Feynman, Audrey Hepburn, Jessica Rabbit, and Britney Spears.
Nice. Yeah, yesterday I was thinking about the people, and I was thinking to myself, crap, I'm not really all that. This is one of those questions that I'd never really have given consideration to. So some of the folks that did come to mind, immediately I was thinking Wittgenstein, a philosopher, as well as Norman Malcolm, who is a lesser known philosopher. I was thinking about
you know what, Jack? Whilst your memory is still ticking away, you're beginning to understand what it's like to be my age and you can't remember things. Somebody, I mentioned this to someone yesterday, and they said to me, if I know Jack at all, he's going to go for the intellectual. and you haven't let me down so far. This is
You didn't even let me finish.
I can't think of anything worse than sitting at a dinner party with a philosopher talking about all this philosophical garbage. I want a party, and come on, you cannot say that that is not going to be a lively party with those six.
That's true. That would be a very lively party. I mean, if it was just a party. I mean, like when it comes to parties, like, coworkers, for example, they don't invite me to their parties because their notion of party is get drunk, have a hangover the next day. That's party to them. Now, that's not party to me. Party to me is relaxing, having casual conversation, and leaving with my intellect still intact.
I'm not that arrogant. I don't think I would go to the party with any intellect, let alone leave it. I might have more knowledge afterwards, but maybe not more intellect. But sorry, so you mentioned too, and you also said earlier on that you'd have Jesus there, which actually is kind of cheating, because that means in a way you've kind of got three in by default, because you Jesus, the Holy Ghost, and God. So that's kind of cheating. But hey, we can deal with that. Who else?
Okay.
Female company? Anyone that came to mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that. When you brought your list up, I was thinking, who? I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Like any, because like I said, I rarely go to sort of parties. I'm trying to think who would I really? Okay. Oh yeah, actually, I do have somebody. Norma Jean, Marilyn Monroe. I would love to have her at a party.
I knew you would have her. That's why I put Audrey in, and I was prepared to battle Audrey against Norma. Yeah.
I love. Oh wow, and I love it.
I almost had her on my list, and genuinely the only reason I didn't have her is I thought I bet Jack will have her. So I've got to come up with someone different. Yeah, I don't think she was quite in Audrey's league so far as intelligence is concerned, but she was not stupid by any means, and she was a very interesting person, and I would love to have a conversation with her, particularly about the last moments of her life and exactly what was going on with the Kennedys. But I don't sympathize with Rasputin. I mean, there were so many stories about him. I'd say he was a very religious person, but his religion was not in accordance with yours. For example, he was of the view that the only way that you could really rid yourself of sin was to first totally immerse yourself in sin. And I thought, what a great outlook that is. So he basically slept with as many women as possible to immerse himself in sin, and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry." You've got to put your hands up to that. Come on.
Well, I would say that there is something to be said about this idea of reaching the depth of sinfulness to where you begin to realize just how dark of a place it is, and then you desire to get out of it. I
even had ready my book. I mean, look at that. That is surely the personification of sin.
He looks like a lot of Orthodox monks, and that's, there would be some Orthodox folks, like Saint John of Kronstadt. I don't think anyone would know him, but he would certainly be somebody that I would love to be able to have at that party. Talking about Norma Jean, though, it was actually only a couple nights ago that I was listening to Elton John's song "Candle in the Wind." That was actually, I believe, my first sort of exposure to who this person was, if I recall, because she was sort of before my time. But I just was intrigued by really this simple. I mean, my understanding of Norma Jean is very simplistic. It's largely based off of that song. But it's such that, I've seen various YouTube videos, and I, got the MP3, and there's something about his song that is very, just deeply meaningful. And then to see, videos on YouTube that bring, sort of these images together in a way that, I don't know, it's just so profound.
I don't know enough about it, but a former girlfriend of mine who was a very strong feminist was a huge fan of Marilyn's, and the idea that she was just this sort of like sex object and that was the only aspect to her character is totally wrong. I wish I knew more about her, but she undoubtedly was a very interesting character. So yeah, if Audrey couldn't make it, I think I'd have Marilyn as a backup. I'm not sure Marilyn would respond to a B-rate invitation, but who knows? Jack, should we have a look at some of the comments and see whether we want to get people in or discuss issues that they're raising?
Yeah, of course.
I'm somewhat confused about how I'm going to do it. I think I'd have to bring them in on my Skype account, and I'm not particularly excited about most people knowing what that is, but we'll see what we can do. Sorry, you were just about to say, do I mind if...
Do you mind if I, give a shameless promo?
Not at all. Hey, you paid for this 2 hours.
So, of course, everyone, I think most people know I'm Together for Peace on YouTube. I also, I do have a webpage on Tumblr, which is togetherforpeace.com. So if people are interested in checking out some of what I write on Tumblr, or even Facebook as well, which is facebook.com/togetherforpeace. That's
send me all the links, and as I say, I'd probably post this as just one video on the Magic Sandwich Show, but send me the links and I will add them in the description.
Fabulous.
Wrong mouse. So, having a look at the chat, the first thing I see is from Dr. Kent Hovind. According to Fundies, all homos are parasites who should be executed, especially Turing. I also saw that flicking through the chat, it mentioned that it was Turing's 100th birthday. That's true. And in fact, God bless them. Google. Oh, did you see what I just did there, Jack? God bless them.
Amazing.
You see, deep down, I know there's a God. God bless them. Google have actually got a kind of Turing machine. If you go to their homepage and do a search, you'll actually see a Turing machine in operation. Oh, and Jack, you asked me about the books before the show started, one of them being Roger Penrose's The Emperor's New Mind, which discusses in great detail the Turing machine. So there we go. I told you, behind me is probably all the knowledge you ever need to know in life. So yes, that is an issue that will be discussed on the Magic Sandwich Show, which will be starting at, oh God, how many hours? We've got 2 hours and 15 minutes. The Magic Sandwich Show will start, and that will have on the panel Potholer 54, RN, and possibly Thunder. It depends. Thunderfoot, where he is at the moment, it's not the most conducive time for him. And I have a horrible feeling if he does turn up, he may have been out celebrating on a Saturday evening, but we shall see. Peter Hadfield, yes, potholer. Anyway, together, you had to have been told at one time in your life that you look like Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, DPR, I've been told that I look like a lot of people who happen to all have.
I don't even know who Dennis Quaid is.
Neither do I, but I've been told. I know for a fact Dennis Quaid has a beard. I don't actually know for a fact. Based upon experience, everyone says I look like someone who happens to have a beard. I don't know what that's about, but for some reason I look like a lot of people who have beards, including Rasputin. Thunderfoot dropped by down here in Boise, Idaho, right?
Yes, I saw a brief bit of footage on YouTube where the two of you met up, which I thought was great. And again, you got on fine. You looked like you were having a good time. There was some bell that you were ringing and stuff, and then he was playing with his plane. It was great. Two boys having fun. It was lovely to see. So maybe there is a bridge between the divide of the atheist and theist community on YouTube. But no, what I think is instructive, perhaps, and maybe you'll agree with this or perhaps not. Thunder in real life is not the person you see on YouTube. And this again goes back to one of the earlier things we were saying, that people's persona on the internet is rarely what they are really like. He's pretty harmless in real life and quite a giggle, isn't he?
Oh yeah, no, I certainly enjoy talking with him, and that's been my experience over the years, is that whenever I meet someone in real life, who they are in real life tends to be far less extravagant than their YouTube persona.
Yeah, I think part of that is, I mean, it depends why you make YouTube videos and what you're trying to do. I think that if you are doing them as he started off on an educational basis and basically knocking young earth creationists and the like of Bernard X, then it's very easy to pick up the idea of what his persona may be. And likewise, to an extent, me, I'm sure that well, I know there are all sorts of people on YouTube and on the internet who think that I'm a complete and utter wanker. It's inevitable because of the tone. I don't sort of like post YouTube videos in order to make friends. I post them because I have a point to make, and it's a point that a lot of people are likely to disagree with. But there we are. In real life, actually, I'm probably more of a wanker than Thunderfoot is. Anyway, for the people who are watching, here's your chance. We might bring you on as a caller if you want, or just post a question in the chat. We've got another, well, as I say, I don't mind overrunning a bit, another 15, 20 minutes or so. Was there anything else that you wanted to raise, Jack?
What do you think about, it's been how many, several years now. I don't know how long you've been on YouTube. What, 4 years or?
I would have to look. I think I actually set up an account 2 years before I ever made it a video.
Okay.
I think it's 6 years that I've had an account and 4 years since I've actually made it. 4 years since I made my first video.
What do you think about, because after I left and I came back, it seems like a lot has really toned down. I definitely don't see very much activity so much anymore. And perhaps this is a good thing. I think a lot of people have it seems to me, maybe realized that you can only talk about what you don't believe in so much.
To an extent, I think that's true, but I would put it down to a different reason. I think that certainly when I first became aware of YouTube, there were many theists. And I say I'm not tarring you with the same brush, and indeed I've expressly stated that you do not use the type of argument that many of these people do use. But you did have the likes of Ben and Fang X, who would be parroting Kent Hovind material. And there were, when I first started, there were a lot of people such as Thunderfoot, there was the Extant Dodo, there was CDK007, who were doing videos rebutting the sorts of arguments that these theists were advancing. And I think that the theists have actually stopped using those arguments on the internet because they realized that they weren't getting anywhere with them. I think what we're seeing now is probably a slight shift in a lot of theists' attempts at advancing their cause, such as Eric Hovind and Cy Ten Bruggencate, who are using now philosophical arguments, such as the presuppositional position, which I have to congratulate them on in a way. I consider it to be the most wonderful cop-out for ever having to present an argument, because they basically say our position is unless, well, their presuppositions are the God of the Bible exists, and there's another one, but they won't actually discuss it. This is a great thing. They won't discuss it. Their basic position is we're not going to adopt any neutral ground unless you concede and agree with us that the God of the Bible exists and his word is true and has been revealed or whatever. Then conversation's non-starter. It's not going to happen. What a wonderful way. So basically they're saying, agree with me from the outset, and then I'll have a conversation with you. But if you don't agree, I'm not talking about it. I think it's wonderful. It gets them out of having to present any coherent argument. So
Well, I mean,
that shift.
yeah.
But as I say, going back to your initial point, I think the reason why things have calmed down is because there were less people like Venom Fang X advancing redundant arguments. Perhaps some of those arguments have drifted off to other websites because, you know, the amount of websites and the ease at which you can put a website together is much easier than it was a few years ago. So maybe it's sort of like some of the traffic has slipped off YouTube for that reason. I don't know, but those are my views.
No, that's actually that's a great observation, actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's perhaps and some of what I had mentioned. But you're right. I definitely see not some. I mean, actually, some of my Christian friends who are on Facebook have told me that they initially came to YouTube with a very an apologetic approach that was didn't really play out so well for them on YouTube because they realized how it just didn't work. And so what ended up happening is they ended up going back to the drawing board and figuring out, okay, wait, I was told that this is going to be so amazing, but in reality it wasn't. And then they were forced to consider, okay, what is the role of defending Christianity on a venue like YouTube? Like, what does that look like? And why am I doing it to begin with? Like Venom Fang X, he's still doing videos. I don't even follow his videos at all anymore. I don't even.
He's gone through many manifestations in his troubled time on YouTube. As I say, I mean, he obviously started off with Kent Hovind parroting, and it was. I mean, he hadn't thought about it. He just thought, yeah, this is wonderful. I'll just repeat everything that he said, and then he started receiving video responses from Thunderfoot, which kind of showed that he wasn't actually right in what he was saying. He then tried briefly a philosophical point, but it really wasn't particularly well presented. It was all God exists outside of the universe and this very vague stuff. He got his ass kicked with that. He then, of course, did a bit of stuff about Islam, which meant that he disappeared for the first time for a few months. He's come back with some more well thought out philosophical arguments in the last year or so, but now his concentration is obviously, I think, purely on his imminent, well, I wouldn't say employment, but his work for Jews for Jesus in New York. And before anyone criticizes me for doc dropping or giving him away,
he said it in his video.
Said it all himself.
Yeah.
That's an odd one as well. It's, and I say, I'm not tarring you. Make this clear. I'm not tarring you with this brush. You've never done this, but it's typical again, isn't it? That even though this is why I didn't use the word employment. He is not being employed. It's actually paying them, and he's asking for money to finance him going to work for Jews for Jesus. It's odd, isn't it? And I don't want you to take this personally because we've done very well not to argue so far. But it's odd, isn't it, that God's messengers always seem desperately in need of money. God is not very good at money management and financial considerations, nor, I have to say, do I think that his PR department has really got it right. If he's relying on the likes of Venom Fang X and Nephilim Free to advance his case, I think he needs to have a look at that as well, don't you? Well,
I think, God ultimately is not in need of them to advocate for the truth of Christ. But Christianity speaks to this reality that indeed we are sinners and broken, and the fact that we're going to bump into people like Venom Fang X and Neph who are in a way much clearer to all of us as having issues. But I would be very cautious about saying that I'm, or anyone really for that matter, is that much different. And it's just a matter of, where our brokenness lies. And for them, I think, for Venom Fang, it seems certainly that there's pride, and that's a huge struggle that I myself have faced, and YouTube lends itself towards that. But I can't believe why anyone would invest any money in sending Venom Fangox to be a missionary.
I think that in relation to both Venom and Nephilim, my view is, and I know I've not obviously had this view for all my time on YouTube, but my view is now that the less attention they are given, the better. Perhaps for different reasons, but I've not commented on Venom or Nephilim for some time now, and that was a conscious decision. I think that they're best just left.
And I think that's a very mature approach. I wish that, on YouTube this was more often the case. It's really, like, for example, Theo Warner has been going back and forth with this Beelzebub character on YouTube, and at some point you just you step back and you ask yourself, is there something? I mean, what is really going on here? And is this about actual conversation, or is this about what many of us have experienced over the years, and that is people desiring to get more views and subscribers, which is understandable. I think most of us on YouTube desire for that, but there's a sense of desiring for it in a way that seems to be maybe a little bit healthier, I guess. I don't know. And desiring for that in a way that...
I mean, it's basically, I suppose, the difference between picking on an easy target and kicking someone when they're obviously down. I'm referring more to Nephilim now, but
right.
There's a difference between that type of video and actually advancing a positive case.
Right.
I can understand, and indeed I did exactly the same when I started, using the easy victim as a subject matter for a video. And when he had talking about Venom X now, when he had the notoriety that he did when I started making videos, it was very easy, and I built up a reasonable subscriber base, having made videos purely about him. And fortunately, there came a time when Happy Cabby came along and made a public video criticizing me for picking on him, which resulted in me speaking to Happy Cabby over Skype. And ever since, we've been good friends. And what I didn't realize was at the time that he was a Christian. And this is perhaps another thing that's of some note. There have been many people who, when I first got to know them, I had no idea about their religious beliefs, and only subsequently did I find out that they were Christians. dprjones in Australia, who was the moving force behind the DMCA abuse channel, which was set up years ago. Don Exodus, when I first met him, was a Christian. Happy Cabby was. I never had an issue with it. It wasn't a problem because they weren't trying to impose their beliefs on people. And that, as I say, that's a good point to support my argument that I have no issue with any individual and their personal beliefs. My issue is when religion is used in a non-constructive way, to put it at its mildest. That's where I have an issue with it.
Well, and I think that issue, that certainly is applicable to, it's not just religion, and this is where I think it's, and this is the challenge. Thinking about this is a very, you have to step back, and it's hard. This is a big idea, but if you step back and you think it's not just religion, it's actually anyone who is using language in a way that is advocating for some notions of value and worth, which is all of us. And so then asking ourselves, okay, so what is the foundation that we are moving from that provides the strength of this language and the way that we have given it the value and worth that it has? and the religious do it, and the non-religious do it. I think it's overly simplistic, albeit understandable, that we look and we say the religious, forgetting that the religious they're using language, and they're using a framework to sort of present some notion about what it means to be human and how life should be lived and what society should look like. And they're doing what any non-religious person is doing. And all sides are using, as for their arsenal, they're using language and attempting to create some sort of foundation. It's a question of what is that foundation, and whose foundation is really the strongest and worth.
Well, I don't know whether, you see, this makes that a battle then, doesn't it? But that's not a battle that you seem to want to engage in because you want constructive discourse. So, I mean, can we not just accept that we have different belief systems and just leave it at that? Isn't that the most tolerant and understanding way to advance?
Well, it's one way to move forward, but I mean, moving forward and living together in peace doesn't mean that we don't talk about areas where we feel like other people's foundation, for example, is maybe inconsistent or not hasn't been articulated or hasn't been presented in a way that, in other words, a lot of people talk about why they don't believe in something on YouTube, but not very often do we see people establishing the basis by which they can. We don't see people establishing a foundation by which they are giving the language a sort of value and worth that transcends or is more true than the people they are disagreeing with.
You're losing me a little bit here. Language is obviously a tool that we use to aid communication. I don't understand what you mean by giving the language a greater value.
Well, what I mean is that, for example, when you look at how people use language on YouTube that disagree with each other, you will see them use language in ways that, of course, very typical. They want to stigmatize their opponent. So instead of it being about a meaningful conversation about the actual disagreements, they are more interested in presenting a negative understanding of their opponents. And they do this by, of course, they use language. For example, a common one is people will say the religious are engaging in cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance in the realm of psychology is extremely valid and significant and important. In the realm of YouTube, when that phrase gets tossed out there, it's largely being used for the purposes of stigmatizing the religious and not really for the purposes of pursuing a meaningful understanding. And so when I talk about giving language its power, what I'm doing is I'm saying we see these people use these words that obviously have value and significance to them, such that obviously because they're using it as a way to judge and evaluate people they disagree with. My question, though, is where are they getting the value and worth that they are giving the language? In other words, what becomes the basis or foundation by which they begin to evaluate and judge someone else's beliefs and determine that their beliefs are truer or they're than another person?
Again, I'm not entirely following you, because I mean if your point is that people should seek to understand another person's ideas and where they get those ideas from, then yeah, I can understand that, but I don't see where, let me also say, I agree with you that sloppy use of language is not helpful, and I get so irritated when I hear the same old words being bandied around without them, oh, that's a logical fallacy, or no, that's that sort of thing. No, you're just using big words because it makes you sound clever or whatever. Yeah, I understand that sort of your frustration of that intellectual laziness, but at the end of the day, it's not really the language. It's just an attempt, isn't it, to try and resolve someone else's beliefs and ideas that you're suggesting. And at that point, Jack, I'm not going to go away. Well, I am going to go away. Can I have 2 minutes again? And I will be right back.
Yes, of course.
Can I invite you to entertain the audience whilst I'm away?
Of course, I will. I'm good at entertaining.
What is it that you're eating? Because it's it's making a lot of noise when you get it out of the packet. Let's have a look. Hold it up for us. What on earth is that?
It's
We don't have that in this country. Anyway, on that note, I'll be right back. My bladder's exploding.
What was he drinking? Oh my word. What's up, people? What's up? Apparently nothing is up. The sky is okay. The sky is up. I don't have any marshmallows. I have not played Diablo 3. No. Although someone was telling me to, that actually wanted me to go out and buy BioShock 3 to play that. I told him I'd think about it. I actually told him I probably would do that. I'm not sure. We'll see. I try not to play video games very often. I feel like I'm wasting my life.
Jack, I think the time has come where I can actually say this. The reason I didn't mention it before is because, well, you'll understand as I explain the story. YouTube user, the Thinking Atheist, is giving a speech. And I think by now he has probably given it. And at the conclusion of his speech, he will be playing a video which includes comments by a number of YouTubers you may have heard of, such as Thunderfoot, myself, Oren Ra, Thinking Atheist himself, Azomgets Chris, Matt Dillahunty, Dark Matter 2525, Healthy Addict, Evidence, and if I've missed anyone out, I apologize. But he wanted us all to contribute to this video by us giving our thoughts about death, which is why I thought it was funny that you wanted to talk about that. That video will be made public after he's given his speech. Have a look at it. You'll get a lot of our views on death. As I say, somewhat coincidental that that was a topic that you wanted to talk about. And for everyone else that's watching, please look out for that video. The one criticism I have of it is probably that it's too short. And I submitted, and I think others did, about 5 or 6 minutes worth of material, which has been chopped down to 30 or 40 seconds. So you don't get everyone's full views, but worth looking out for. Anyway, how are you doing? DPR, when is the show with Potholer starting? Okay, let me just explain if people are coming expecting to see Potholer. That will start in just under 2 hours' time.
I need to check out this Potholer guy. I've never heard of him. Oh, maybe I did hear about him. You said the Golden Croc Award or something, right?
Golden Crocodile, yes. Potholer has a history in journalism and presenting on radio and also television. So he has a very wonderful style. He's also from this country, which means he's got a brilliant sense of humour. I think so. And he's also got the benefit of being incredibly intelligent as well, which means that his videos are normally pretty awesome. If he takes on a topic, you're going to know damn well that he has researched it to the nth degree, and there'll be very little comeback. In fact, I can't remember, people in the chat may be able to help me out, I can't remember many people coming back to him with a response video. I mean, when he goes to work, he takes a scythe to them and chops them down. But he does it in such a wonderful, entertaining way. And his Golden Crocodile series of videos is well worth watching, as is his series on, I can't remember the title of it. Damn, I better find this out before, in the next 2 hours. What is it, A History of the World Made Easy? The History of the Universe? Someone help me. Someone in the chat help me out here.
Wait, what's his YouTube channel?
History of the Universe Made Easy. Yeah.
How do you spell his YouTube name?
He's never agreed to appear on any show in the past, and he's when I asked people who they would like to see on the show, he is one of the first names that is always mentioned, and I thought that he had some issue, and I couldn't understand it because it was like, is he shy? He can't be camera shy. He was a journalist. He was a television presenter. So what's going on here? I actually discovered the truth. The reason that he never agreed to appear before is because the only Skype internet access he had was in the family room, and he didn't want to appear in the family room or disturb the family or whatever. But now he's sort of like had an extension lead laid into his office, so he can now appear from his office. That was the only issue that stopped him appearing. I can't believe it, but there we go. So, Jack, would it be okay if we would have a look at the comments in the chat, address anything that people say, and wrap it up in a few moments, because obviously I've got to prepare for that show in a while. So, any last comments from anyone in the chat? This is your last opportunity, and then I'll be stopping the show and restarting in an hour and 45 minutes. Blow me a kiss.
There you go.
I don't know whether that was directed at me or you.
Well, that was me.
Oh, of course it must be.
No one wants your kids.
Together, on Dawkins' scale of theistic probability,
I don't know.
Where are you from 1 to 7? Where would you put yourself?
I have no idea. I don't have I've heard of his scale. I never speak of my belief in God in terms of a scale. That seems very bizarre to me, actually, to rate belief in terms of a scale. That just doesn't, yeah.
I'm not sure it's, I mean, I kind of see your point, but I don't think it's completely weird. I mean, for example, let's take the existence of life elsewhere in the universe. Is it not appropriate to consider that view and put it on a scale of probability? I would say that I think it's likely, but I couldn't say for certain. So I'm sort of like, 40%.
Yeah, but when that's true. But when you ask someone, for example, when someone asks me about a belief such as a belief in God, and I'm sure this extends to other beliefs as well, but when they say, the question is, when someone says, do you believe in God? And the response is yes. There isn't, in everyday conversation, there isn't a sense of, okay, how much do you believe in God? How much is, basically qualify your yes for me. I want to know how strong of a yes it is for you, which seems like a very odd notion to me, because in the realm of Christianity, for me personally, I live my life, strive to live my life in relationship with Christ, and so it's, obviously it's such that my life is, I strive to live in obedience and define it by the perspective Christ has laid out. So yeah, it would be very unusual to try and put it on a scale, I would say.
Maybe it's easier for the non-believer to be asked the question, but If I asked you what do you think the chances of, well, it's kind of odd because it's the same God, but the Muslim God, there are differences between the two. The Muslim religion have got it right. What do you think the chances of that are?
Yes, Steve. And once again, I've
I'm
never
just trying to
approached
find an
it.
example where, you know.
Right, and I'm saying I would, and that with regards to this sort of belief, I've never approached it in terms of probability. It's never been a sense of is it on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think the Muslim God is true? It's not that. Instead, it's, do you believe the Muslim God is true? And the response is no. And so it's like someone following up that question with, okay, now that you've told me no, tell me on a scale of 1 to 7 where your no is. You know, it's sort of
Okay,
odd.
well, I mean, I would tend to agree with you. I don't think it's particularly constructive, but maybe it's got some place where as I say, I do not, and never have said there is no God. What I have said is I do not believe in a God, and I see no evidence for it. And I think that could be justifiably put on a scale. And it would be, for me, a very high one. Higher than will the sun rise tomorrow. So yeah, it's not particularly helpful. It doesn't really get us anywhere, but I don't think it's useless.
It's not, well, you know, and the thing is, in those situations, the only time that sort of thing is meaningful is when you have Christians that want to maybe have that aha moment. So, the atheist is like, you know, I don't believe in God. And then, but now, of course, the atheist has to step back and say, well, wait, because the Christian is going to say, well, you can't say you know there isn't a God, because now you're making an epistemological claim that you can't justify. So now atheists have stepped back and they're responding to this philosophical argument and saying, well, it's not that I don't know, it's that based on probability and blah, 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 blah. And to be quite honest, at the end of the day, when, like, my friends who are atheists, all I know is they don't believe in God. How strongly that belief is or isn't is irrelevant to me. I just know that whether they say they know there isn't God or whether they say they don't know, it's irrelevant. Either way, they're still expressing to me that the truth I believe, they don't. And that's sufficient for me. I don't need to corner them and make them somehow argue or demonstrate some sort of inconsistency. I know exactly what they're trying to say.
As I've said a number of times during the course of the last couple of hours, and I will say it again, one of the things I respect about you is that you do not tend to use some of the shabby arguments that your fellow believers do. Jack, I noticed the time, and I would like to carry on the conversation, but I do have to do other things. Can I thank you very much for your kind contribution to last year's MSF event, and let me finish the show as I started it by saying this year's event will take place over the weekend of the 8th and 9th of September, so put that in your diaries. There are going to be some changes which I hope will make it more interesting, and one of the significant changes is that you'll be seeing less of me and more of other people, so that's something to look forward to.
Wait, are they going to look forward to seeing me this year, or am I not invited
Jack,
this time?
all I'm prepared to say at the moment is I have
I put you on the spot.
Four groups of people, I'm not going to say any more at this stage, who are actually booked in. So there is a lot of empty space left to be filled. So you never know. We could see you. We could perhaps discuss that in the next week or so. Because, to be fair, despite its appearance, I have tried to avoid using the label atheist when it comes to the MSF event, because the charity itself makes no discrimination on the basis of religion or any other criteria. And I think it would be wrong of me to sort of like say, oh, this is an atheist event. I know other people describe it that way. I think you'd struggle to find any occasion when I have done that. I just don't mention it. And it would be nice to have some theists involved in this as well.
But, you know, this is actually, really quickly, if you don't mind me pointing out, that this is very interesting, because I know some atheists strongly oppose. I mean, they really oppose the idea. Basically, the mentality is this is an atheist event, and this is for us. This is for us to do something together as a group. And I completely understand that mentality. I'm not against that mentality. And yet at the same time, what's unique about YouTube is that there's also this sense of a much larger community beyond just an atheist or theist community, right? And that's the YouTube community. So it's very interesting. But I would no more
I think
expect
the
for
definition of community, it's got to be defined with clarity. It's somewhat vague, but yes, you're right. If there was any atheist who was involved in the show who held that view, I'm not aware of them, and I would certainly have words with them if that was that view. As I say, the charity itself not only does not discriminate insofar as where it puts its resources. It doesn't discriminate with its employment policy either. I mean, many of the doctors that go out are going to be different denominations of Christians, Catholics, Protestants. Not all of them, obviously, but they also will have Muslim people. It is utterly non-discriminatory, and that is the way I would like the charity event to be as well. If people attach labels to it, it is not as a result of my encouragement to do so.
Yeah.
On that note, Jack, do you realise we've talked for 2.5 hours without raising our voices, without
That's impressive.
face palming, without doing anything, without even, I don't think I've actually sweared. I may have blasphemed when I said, oh my God, but apart from that, it's been incredibly civil.
You have.
Sorry?
You have been incredible. I have too. It's taken a lot, but
as soon as I end this call, I'm going to be banging the table, bashing my head against the wall and saying, what a fucking fuckwit. I can't believe I was so patient with him. But there we go. Not at all, Jack, not at all. I will be messaging you about charity event and other things in the weeks, and I look forward to seeing more of you back on YouTube. Of course, there are going to be occasions when I'm going to be critical of you. You'd expect nothing less of me. But for now, can I ask everyone to thank Jack very much by giving a thumbs up in the chat. And as I say, we'll be back with you 1.5 hours with Potholer, Aaron Ra, and possibly Thunderfoot, depending on how drunk he is. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much indeed, Jack.
Thank you very much. It was great.